Welcome back to my series on how to write LGBT characters and why you should anyway. Today I'm going to be giving you my top 8 tips for writing LGBT characters. If you're looking for how to get started writing LGBT characters, I will link the playlist everywhere and you can check out the first video, which is literally get started writing LGBT characters. If you want to know why you should be writing LGBT characters if you're not LGBT, then I will also link that video, which is also in the playlist. So anyway, let's get started. Don't know what that was. Tip number 1. Go for it! But do your research. Read things by LGBT people. Read things about LGBT people. Be they fiction, be they real life. Not to self-plug, but I do have a lot of LGBT fiction on nopoodles.wordpress.com. Completely free. Oh yeah. Tip number 2. Get beta readers, or higher sensitivity readers, who identify as the same identity of the character you're writing. If it's a gay man, get a gay man to read it. If it's a trans woman, get a trans woman to read it. Listen to their feedback. Try and get more than one. Tip number 3. If there is going to be violence against LGBT characters, I'm using violence as a super broad term here, as anything from misgendering all the way to, murder? Ask yourself why you're doing it and whether it fits with the overall theme of the book. If you're writing a high violence narrative like a warscape or Game of Thrones, I guess, then having violence towards an LGBT character fits with the narrative because you have a lot of violence towards non-LGBT characters. Also make sure that you're not coming out at the end of the story with like a band. You started the story with a band of 20 people and now you have 5, but they're all straight, white, cis, able-bodied men. Don't do that. Don't. As much as LGBT people do face violence and aggression and misgendering in day-to-day life in the contemporary world, it isn't necessarily accurate to put that into your narrative, especially if it's something like fantasy or sci-fi or even historical. You don't have to make your LGBT characters face violence and aggression just because you think it makes it more real. It doesn't. I do not face very much by way of violence and aggression. Yes, as I've said before, I get a fair bit of misgendering because the world is not fully... what's the word? I'm going to use the word aware of non-binary people and what pronouns they should use, but you don't have to put that in. You can make a world or a society, you can put the society in that is totally cool with non-binary people if you have a non-binary character, or at least you can make your protagonist totally okay with non-binary people and figuring out pronouns easily enough. Tip 4. You don't have to misgender a trans person to show that they're trans in the narrative. Be they binary or non-binary, there are plenty of other ways to hint and explicitly state that a character is trans without having them be misgendered even once. This series is going to have a whole video on writing a binary trans character and how to write non-binary people. Using the correct pronouns, even before the character has been fully introduced, is still okay. If you feel like it's not because you're using first person perspective and you want your protagonist to be confused, that's fine. Just avoid pronouns up to the point where your protagonist learns what this person's pronouns are. Example. The green-haired stranger smiled at me. I attempted a smile in return, but I don't think I made it there. The stranger's clothes drew the eye, almost as much as that green mop of hair. The stranger stood, offering their hand. Hi, I'm Yuri. They, them. Nobody had introduced themselves to me with pronouns before. Tip 5. Avoid heteronormative statements, like, any red-blooded woman would want him. Because contrary to popular belief, LGBT people do not bleed in pride flag colours. Tip number 6. Give your characters a specific identity. Name it. Put it out there. I know I said they don't have to come out in a previous video, but you need to make sure that you're putting their identity everywhere in the narrative. Out-of-world outing doesn't count. Step number 7. Do not bury your gays. I talked about this in my top 11 worst LGBT tropes video, but I reiterate, do not bury your gays. In fact, go watch that video. Don't do those things. If you bury your gays, you're reinforcing the idea that LGBT people can't have a happy ending, that all LGBT relationships and lives end in tragedy and sadness and death. Tip number 8. Avoid having your characters wrestle with the idea of being LGBT or being friends with an LGBT person. If you're including LGBT characters, I presume you want LGBT people to read your book. People often read to escape the difficulties of their real lives. LGBT people do this too. I don't want to sit down after a long day of being misgendered or worse and decide to read a book and chill and relax, only to find that the non-binary character gets beaten up just because they're non-binary. But I do want to come home and read a book with a non-binary character in it, which is a big part of the reason I write so many short stories with non-binary characters in them. A big part of the reason that in both of the manuscripts that I have, well, one I have finished and I'm starting to query, and the other one I have almost finished the second/full draft of. And they both have non-binary people in them. Why? Because we exist. We're everywhere. I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to stay up to date with the series, you should think about subscribing to my channel. I will be posting from now all the way through to the end of June. Don't forget you can check out the playlist for the other videos in the How to Write LGBT Characters and Why You Should Anyway series. If you want to read my short stories, they're all available for completely free on nopoodles.wordpress.com. If you want to stay up to date with my life, my work and my bunnies, then you should follow me on social media. I am on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter as nopoodles. And if you'd like to support me and what I do, there's a link to my Ko-fi account in the description below. This series is going to have a whole video on just writing a trans character, being trans. This tip 4. Tip 4. Because contrary to popular belief, LGBT people do not breed